Good day. Welcome to APA's weekly webinar. My name is Billy Zydick, Manager, Special Projects for APA. Just a couple of housekeeping items before we get started. The webinar recording will be posted to the APA webpage later this afternoon. You'll receive a follow-up email in the next couple of days with a link to the webpage where all webinar recordings are housed, as well as links to our upcoming webinars. We have webinars planned out through the end of 2021, and many are open for registration. Professional continuing education and AIA CLU credits are being offered for today's program. If you're an AIA professional requiring a certificate, please send an email to me at Billie, B-I-L-L-I-E, @apa.org, along with your AIA membership number if you have not done so in the past. All attendees are in listen-only mode. Please type your question in the chat box and they will be answered in the order they are received. If we run out of time and we still have questions, responses will be sent directly to the person asking the question by our presenter. If you are just calling in, make sure you send me an email at billie@apa.org to let me know so I can send you a certificate if you requested one. The system only recognizes you if you log in. At this time, it's my pleasure to turn this over to Peter Mann. Peter, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Billie. I really appreciate being afforded this opportunity to speak through indoor air quality. I've been in the indoor air quality business for 20 years now. Our company, full disclosure, manufactures HEPA air purifiers, but I'm not here to sell anything. I'm actually more on the engineering side and really want to provide just the basic information, the cliff notes, so to speak, in terms of like what you really need to know to ensure that your air is clean and you're providing a safe environment. You know, COVID's actually been, it's been really awful, as everyone knows, but from an indoor air quality perspective, it's really raised the awareness. And in a certain way, it's encouraging to see that actions being taken place to address that. And so what I'm really wanting to talk about today is, you know, what's really needed from an HVAC system standpoint, what's needed from an air quality standpoint, and how can you provide solutions that are affordable, but also work properly. And so that's really what this talk is going to be about. I've got about 20 slides, and there should be a fair amount of time for Q&A at the end. I'm happy to answer any questions. My training originally was through the Indoor Air Quality Association. We're also members of AHAM, which helps sets indoor air quality standards. And so I'm pretty familiar with how the testing standards were developed and really what it takes to have a safe, clean environment. And so as an overview, what I'd like to do is first talk about, I guess APA had some fall survey results and kind of talk about some of the things that we can touch on, and then step into the principles of indoor air quality, specific concerns within classrooms, and then what the experts have to say. I'm not here basically I'm just giving the highlights of what the agencies are saying are the best practices. And so from the survey, you notice on the left, it seems like a fair amount of cleaning practices are going to continue, as well as on the right, 36% are looking at MERV 13 and 14 filter upgrades. And then there's a number of other different technologies that are being considered. And so I'm going to really be able to speak to each of those in this presentation. And so from a needs standpoint, clear guidance has been a challenge. It seems like in certain cases it's been changing. And so I'm going to talk about kind of what we're seeing as the current guidance and really what guidance has really been all along, but it's now finally being adopted. And then to talk about some HVAC requirements and upgrades and what's really needed to provide proper indoor air for the people in the space. And then risk mitigation strategies or things that can be done to really improve the air quality for the peace of mind and safety for everyone involved. And so to start, there's been a lot of talk about MER filters, and I really wanted to start with the ASHRAE standard 52.2. ASHRAE is the American Society of Heating, Refrigerating, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And what this is on the right is it's a filter efficiency range, and the scale goes from 1 to 16. There's 3 different range size particles. Range 1 are the smallest particles, 0.3 microns to 1. And on the right, we consider those larger particles, it's 3 to 10 microns. And so historically, what's happened is filters have been sized for HVAC systems for the sake of the equipment. And so what the equipment cares about is keeping the coils clean, and that's really the range 3 particles. But what's happened with COVID is now it's like, wait a second, what about the people in this space? And the people in this space care about range 1 and actually even smaller particles. And so it's really, that's really what's driven the need to try and get higher efficiency filters. You know, I've put a circle around MERV 13, and what that means is 50% of particles of the smaller size particles are removed. And the reason why that's important is because the smaller particles stay suspended in the air the longest. They're the ones that you're going to breathe in and enter your bloodstream. So from a health perspective, it's the ones you want to pay attention to. The problem is, as most of you know, is as you go for a higher MERV filter, the pressure drop increases. That is, it's harder to move the air through the filter, and that reduces your amount of ventilation. So it's kind of a balance. It's like, how do you put a better filter in an existing system? It's really hard. Or you need a stronger motor, stronger fan system to move the air through that. And so from a people standpoint, you really want to be looking at range 1. When you're talking about COVID's even smaller than that. There's generally it's around 0.1 or 0.12 microns. It can be as small as 0.02. And that's a whole level of degree more difficult to remove. And so if you look at the MERV 13 row, if you're at range 3, it's removing 90%. If you go to range 2, it's 85%. You go to range 1, it drops to 50%. If you go, assume there's one more column to the left, which are virus-sized particles, it's going to drop even more. And so that's kind of the challenge in this situation. And if you drop down to the MERV 16, it's 95% across the board, and 95% at 0.3 microns. That's what an N95 mask is, just for perspective. And then within the portable air cleaning space, there's HEPA filters, and that's sometimes referred to as MERV 17, and it's 99.97%. And when you get to that level of filtration, when you get to virus-sized particles, the performance stays pretty close to that. You don't get so much of a drop-off if you have a true HEPA filter. And so the principle of air cleaning is really simple to understand. You just need to move enough air through high quality filters for the room size. And really importantly is don't solve one problem and create another one. And so while the concept is really easy to understand, it's really difficult to do because to move the air through a high quality filter are opposing forces. And so it's just really difficult. And so kind of what I was alluding to is HVAC systems are designed for the equipment and lower MERV rated filters. And so they're also designed to really maintain temperature, not so much air quality. And so when you reach a temperature, the HVAC just shuts off and it's expensive to run, so you don't want to run it. But with indoor air quality, you really want to be running it all the time. And so it requires some changes there to support that. So you really need sufficient airflow, but you want constant airflow. And if you put too restrictive of a filter in, it's going to add a lot of motor stress. It's like if you're wearing a mask and a mask is really restrictive, it's difficult to breathe. Well, we're doing the same thing to HVAC systems by putting in higher quality filters, but the motor's not strong enough to move through it. And the one advantage I would say for a commercial versus a residential HVAC system is commercial units typically bring in air from the outside, And so for something like COVID, that's really important. You want to bring in plenty of ventilation. A residential HVAC system largely just recirculates it within the house. And so a commercial unit, if you can bring in enough air from the outside, you can, and improve the ventilation, you can significantly improve the air quality. And so from the indoor air quality perspective, air conditioning is about conditioning the air. So it's not just temperature or humidity, it also includes what's the indoor air quality. And there's a lot of things going on right now that are contributing to poor air quality. It could be pollution, it could be dust if you have a really old building or old ducting systems, wildfires out west, pollen, ragweed's about to kick in or is kicking in certain parts of the country. Ozone is a problem. I lived in Austin, Texas for 20 years, and there's ozone action days in the summer where if you have a respiratory issue, you're not supposed to be outside because it aggravates that. There's VOCs, which would be like cleaning supplies, chemicals, formaldehyde off-gassing from furniture, and also carbon dioxide. If you have a bunch of people in an enclosed space without properly ventilating it, you will build up carbon dioxide. So there's a number of air quality issues that historically have really not been addressed because you can't see it. And funding is a huge problem, and this is another one. It's kind of hard to fund something you can't see, but the situation's always been there. And so the EPA has done a lot of work. They're really the leading kind of agency on this. This came out of the Clean Air Act from a few decades ago. And so the first most important strategy is source control. It's like you used to be able to smoke on planes, and you can't smoke on planes. It makes the air quality that much better. So if you can remove the source of the pollution, that's the best step. And as it relates to schools, there's a lot of cleaning supplies now with COVID. Where are those being stored? How are they being used? Are there paints? Are there chemicals? Is there off-gassing from new furniture in the school? And then, so it's kind of thinking about, are we introducing pollution into the environment? And if so, how can we control it? And if the outdoor air quality is so poor, opening the windows is generally a really good idea if the air quality outside is good, but if you've got wildfire smoke blowing in, it's not a great option. The second thing is ventilation. And so just quoted this right from their EPA site, is increase the amount of outdoor air coming indoors. And so if you can open the windows, that's a great thing. But if you have pollen, pollution, extreme temperatures, it's not always practical. And so when you think about an indoor space, especially for a school, an analogy I like to use is think of it like an aquarium and not an air conditioner. An air conditioner is expensive to run, and then when it reaches the temperature, it shuts off because, with AC, it can get too cold. But with air cleaning and air quality, the air can really never be too clean. It's like an aquarium. Like you would never shut the motor or the filter off because bad things happen when you shut it off. And so you really want to keep the air moving in a space, and you want to keep it filtering as best as you can. You don't want the system to completely shut off. It's not good because pollutants just kind of accumulate inside if it's not being constantly ventilated and filtered. And the third strategy, if you can't solve it with source control and ventilation, is air cleaning. And the effectiveness depends upon how well it collects the pollutants. So it's the efficiency, kind of think about the MERV rating. It's like what percentage of the particles are being removed, and then how much air is moving through the filter expressed in cubic feet per minute. And so there actually is a performance standard that encompasses that, and it's called the smoke CADR. And I'll jump into that in the next one. And this is the only metric you need to know to understand how, if you're looking at, say, a portable HEPA air purifier, how well one model compares to another one. And it's really just the volume of clean or filtered air down to 0.3 microns. And so on the right, I've done a snapshot from just 3 of our products on the Energy Star site. And the way it works is Intertech, which is a safety and certification organization, they have a test lab in Cortland, New York, and brands will send their products, or Intertech will just order their products in, and they'll test 3 products and then come up with, this is the performance of the product. It's tested at an independent test lab. And then every year, Intertech purchases more products and re-verifies to make sure that this is indeed the performance. And this standard was created as a way for customers to accurately compare performance across products. And so there's 2 places you can go to see the actual lab results. And one is the EnergyStar.gov site, which is run by the EPA. And the other one is the AHAM directory. You can just Google AHAM verified directory to see that. And so on the right, I've highlighted for our EJ120 model, the smoke C8AR is 322. And so that tells you, with that number, you know the performance of the product. And so the next question is, well, what do you do with that number? And just to back up a half step, there is an industry standard for the smoke C8AR. It's the ANSI AHAM AC1. And what they determined was to remove 80% of those finer smoke particles in a room, you need 5 air changes per hour. And so if you know the smoke C8AR and you want to know how large a room can it clean, the standard is multiply it by 1.55, and that'll tell you how large of a room it can clean. Similarly, if you know that your room size, you just multiply your room size in square feet times 2/3. In this case, if your room is 500, it would imply you needed 333 C8AR to effectively clean that room. Furthermore, Harvard has really been a leading advocate around indoor air quality for schools, and I've listed at the bottom the URL for that website. You can also Google Harvard classroom air cleaning to see this information. They also have a calculator on their site that's pretty helpful. But their quick rule of thumb is to look for portable air purifier with a HEPA filter, look for a high clean air delivery rate, and then avoid the add-ons like ionizers, UV lights, other types of electronic filtering. And so again, the goal, they say also is 5 air changes per hour. But where they differ is they're combining the outdoor air ventilation plus any room air cleaners that you're potentially adding to the space. And so most classrooms are designed for 3 air changes per hour. And according to Harvard, a lot don't even meet that standard. And so to get to 3, you need to either upgrade your HVAC system or insert like supplemental or portable air cleaners into space to get to the 5. And so in this case, if you had 3 air changes per hour from your HVAC system, then a portable air cleaner, you need 2 air changes per hour. And so this is the formula, and we're gonna be sending this out afterwards. So, but basically in the example, if your room size is 1,000 square feet and you need 2 air changes per hour, and your ceiling height is 8 feet, you would need a smoke C8AR of 266. And that's how you know that you're buying a product that's going to effectively clean the air. You're not underbuying or overbuying. That's ideally kind of what you're looking for. Now, if the ceilings are higher, you've got more volume of space or air to clean. And in a 1,000 square foot room, you would need a 333 C8AR, or that would be the target that you would want to hit to get to 5 air changes per hour to reduce the pollutants by 80%. And then as it relates to UVC, we've seen a lot of this, and it's been kind of just going to say, as someone that really we just want people to buy products that work properly. UV has a really good purpose, and it's largely to prevent mold growth. And so you see it in a lot of HVAC systems where there's condensation or accumulated water, because the last thing you want is mold to be growing and then to blow that throughout your building. It can lead to things like sick building syndrome or Legionnaire's disease. And so when you have a UV lamp, in contact with, where there's condensation or water, it could kill off the mold or prevent it from growing. And so the thing to know about UV is it needs contact time. And so if someone is selling a UV system and they says, well, this will remove X% of bacteria or viruses or whatever it may be, the question you want to ask is, how much contact time does it need to do that? Because generally it needs many minutes to do that. And if you have like an air cleaning system that's blowing the air past it in a fraction of a second, it doesn't have enough contact time to do anything. The only potential use could be if it's in contact with your filter, it could prevent potentially mold from growing. But if you have, say, a virus and you've got a true HEPA filter and it's able to hold on to that virus, the virus is going to die in the filter anyways. And so, killing it on the filter is, in my opinion, it's kind of overkill. It's not really necessary, but it's definitely not going to kill the air that's blowing past it. It just doesn't have enough contact time. And then the other one is bipolar ionization, and I've got like a long thing from the EPA, but the short of it is it's emerging or not fully tested or proven technology. What they recommend is ensure if you have something like that, that it's certified to UL 2998, and it's really a safety issue. Like with a HEPA filter works off of mechanical filtration, so it really just catches things that passes through. A lot of these electronic filter technologies, or some of them, create chemical reactions. And so what happens in a test lab is it's in a controlled environment and they do some testing and they can prove it's effective to kill or remove certain things. The problem is it's not fully safety tested, in that it is not tested in a real world environment. So if you have a lot of cleaning supplies, if you've got VOCs, if you've got paints, if you've got new furniture that's off-gassing, it's then also creating a chemical reaction with the chemicals and gases that are coming off of that, and who knows what that's producing. And that's why EPA recommends this UL 2998, just to make sure it's unlikely to cause a chemical reaction. From my opinion, it's not worth the risk of having something that, solve one problem and create another one. It kind of defeats the whole purpose of indoor air cleaning. But it's what, I don't know, I kind of hate to say it, but it's what some brands do to try and get an edge. But I think the goal should be, you want it to be effective, but you also want it to be safe. And so right now, the safest technology is HEPA because it doesn't introduce any ozone or any of the byproducts that you could potentially get with some of these electronic filtering technologies. And so the CDC has kind of been a little bit all over the place, but now they're largely following what the EPA has been saying really for decades. And it's bringing as much outdoor air as possible. If you can, open the windows and doors. It doesn't cost anything to open the windows, and it's, if you can get proper ventilation that way, that would definitely be the way to go. Ensure your HVAC system is continuously moving the air. If it hits the temperature and then shuts off, that's a problem. You really want it to be running all the time to keep moving the air. The third step, they say, is to improve the level of air filtration as much as possible and consider HEPA filters. And then their fourth step is if options above aren't possible, they suggest a UV lamp. I think UV can be good as long as you're not in contact with the lamp and it has proper contact time to remove whatever you're wanting removed. And so I'm just going to jump real quick to outdoor air quality. So the EPA also, this came out of the Clean Air Act, set up a standard or a guide to measure outdoor air quality and show different levels of concern. And so generally, the air in the US has been pretty good, but it's changed quite a bit with the wildfires lately. And so if you have someone that has asthma or COPD or another respiratory condition, as the numbers start to go up, it could be a problem, especially for those groups. And so the EPA has created the scale to assess at what level of concern or what considerations should you have. I think about it as like, should you have the windows open or not? This kind of gives a good guidance as to you know, where that is. And if it's below 100, generally it's should be no problem. If it starts to get above it, it can create problems for the sensitive people in a building. And so on the left, this is a screenshot from Apple iPhone, and Apple's recently started to include air quality information. So this is Winthrop, Washington from a couple weeks ago when they had pretty bad wildfires, and you can see their air quality is 478. It's really not great. And what Apple does if you have the weather app is it moves it above the temperature so you can see exactly what the air quality is in your area. And so it's really encouraging to see that this is kind of being incorporated into devices. I'm not aware that this is available in other weather apps, but it's kind of, if you have an Apple iPhone, it's definitely worth checking out. This is a site that we've created, and it's actually the same data that Apple has, except we've put it into a map version. And so the air quality is accurate down to 5 meters. It's updated hourly. And so, and it shows you exactly what's in the air. And so if you're, wanting to see what your air quality is or air quality in, adjoining areas, you can see visually and numerically what it is. Next month, we're going to be launching an app and having a forecast to project what the air quality is, but it's the same data source Apple uses. We're just providing a bit more detail behind it. In addition, we also provide pollen. It's the same data source, but for those that, especially for asthmatics, this is really important. If you're going to open the doors and windows, if the allergens are very high, it's good to know that so you don't potentially create a health issue. And this similarly has a forecast showing you what to expect air quality wise within the pollen. It also can give you alerts if the levels are going to be high. And so in summary, the EPA, I would say, is, they've been consistent and they've been saying this for decades. Is source control, remove the source of the pollution. Next step is ventilation. Just make sure you have proper ventilation in the space, make sure it's constantly moving. And if you can't solve the problem with ventilation, then consider air cleaning as a third step. It's definitely like not the thing to lead with, but it's kind of a catch-all. There's a lot of older buildings that just don't have proper ducting or proper ventilation, and there's just dead zones ventilation-wise, and those are kinds of areas that we've seen that have been used for air cleaning. Harvard really mimics what the EPA says, but their suggestion is to supplement the HVAC system with HEPA air cleaners to get to the 5 air changes per hour. And I would say, choosing an air purifier, if you are going to get one, can be pretty confusing, but all you need to know is the smoke CADR, and you don't have to listen to any brand. Just go to the Energy Star site or the AHAM verified directory, and you'll get the actual lab test result number to accurately and fairly compare products. And then I would also say it's really important to monitor the outdoor air quality. Opening windows is a great ventilation strategy, but you don't want to, you're kind of restricted if the outdoor air has a number of issues amongst itself. So I got through that in about 30 minutes. I guess if there's questions, we have sales@aronsi.com, welcome to email to, and I'll just open it up for any questions.
Okay, Peter, we do have questions. The first question is, do we risk damaging equipment by filtering down to range 1 versus OEM range 3?
Yeah. Because it's if you're putting in a filter that's a higher MERV rating, you're putting more stress on the motor, and so you really need like a HVAC technician to help assess what that is. But I mean, there is an optimal or level of filtration that the systems are designed for, and if you just take an existing system and just put better filters in, you could very well burn the motor out or stress it out, or you would limit the ventilation, so you're filtering out more stuff, but you're not getting enough ventilation in the spaces. If you're trying to get to 5 air changes per hour and say it produces 3, it may drop it to 2. And so just putting the better filtering could cause other issues.
Okay, thank you for the answer. Our next question. If a classroom is using a retrofitted AC unit that does not connect to the outside air, is that classroom more at risk for viruses spreading?
I'm not sure which retrofitted. I mean, normally HVAC system in a building is bringing in air from the outside. I mean, that's how most of them work. Ventilation, I guess there's a number of different ways to think about it but is there proper ventilation in the space? Really, the thing about ventilation is if you think about COVID, it's safer to be outside than in because you have all this natural ventilation. And so by having an AC running or ventilation going, you're really trying to replicate kind of what's happening outside naturally. And so again, I'm not quite sure what the implication of retrofitted is, but if it's providing additional airflow that helps you get to your 5 air changes per hour, that's definitely a good thing. I'm not sure beyond that how else to answer it.
Okay, well, thank you. Maybe the person asking the question can elaborate a little bit more, and we'll get back to that question. Our next question. Would opening windows really throw the building air balance off? This is not encouraged for research buildings. Please elaborate how to deal with the air balance if people open windows randomly.
I mean, as it relates to COVID, it's definitely a positive thing to do because you want as much air moving in as possible. So I mean, it depends also what the quality of the outside air is. If it's very hot and humid, it could create some problems, and so it's a balance between the two. And so the answer is it really depends. I mean, obviously, if the air quality outside is poor, you don't want to open the windows. If you open the windows for the room that the windows are open in, it's definitely a positive for that space and the people in that space. If I'm not really sure how it affects the air moving through a building negatively, unless the air coming in just is adding a ton of humidity or other things that are in odds of what a normal indoor air environment is like.
Okay, thank you. Next question. What is the approximate cost per square foot to add air purifiers in the large classroom buildings?
Whew, that's a good question. It stretched my mind. And so I did the, I don't know if I can go back to the slide. So here's a couple models from ours that we, 234 to 338. It depends on how big if you have a 1,000 square foot area, you need 2 air changes per hour. You would need 266. You could, anywhere from probably $250 to $500 per unit, and they would each, clean 1,000 square feet.
Okay, well, thank you. Next question is, are there any special considerations for pools, shall we say?
Oh, indoor pools?
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, with pools, oof, yeah, it's mold is a big problem because it's so humid. Mold's wanting to grow. It's looking for a food source. I mean, it's got a water source, obviously, and it's looking for a place to latch onto. And so trying to really reduce the humidity levels, ideally is the goal. And one way to do it is through ventilation, just ensuring the air is really moving through that space properly. If you have stagnant air in a pool type setting, you're kind of opening yourselves up for growing mold. And then the last thing you would want that mold to do is to get into your duct network, because then you could be spreading that throughout your building. And so ventilation is really important. There's certain types of ventilation equipment you can just ventilate directly into the room or out of the room to try and maintain an optimal level. Generally, you want to keep it at or below 50% humidity in a pool. I don't know if it's stagnant, you could you would be much higher than that. And so I think ventilation is really the best solution there.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is, if current building systems cannot handle the pressure drops due to better filters, and there are concerns of mold by increasing ventilation, are supplemental air cleaners the only remaining solution?
Yeah, it's the next best solution. Because if you have a portable HEPA air cleaner, the reason why those work well is because you have a self-contained motor fan assembly moving it through that filter, and it has a fan and a motor that are designed to effectively move it through that type of a filter. So they're designed to filter, through a MERV 16 or some call it MERV 17 filter.
Okay. Our next question is, can portable air cleaners be detrimental to air quality by actually blowing the COVID virus from an infected person to a person downstream of the unit?
Yeah, it's kind of, if you think about like on an airplane, airplanes have HEPA filters and they blow the air. And so anytime you're moving air, you potentially could be blowing it, but the airflow generally out of a HEPA air purifier is not so strong that it's not like a box fan that you put up and you feel the breeze blowing across you. It's generally dispersed, and so unless you're sitting right next to the output or within a couple feet of the output of the air cleaner, you're not going to get the air being pushed across you. So I think it's possible if you're right next to it, but if the air cleaner has a few feet from people and it's spaced out, it's not going to be. I wouldn't think it would be blowing the air into people or spreading the COVID.
Okay, thank you. Our next question. We have office spaces in a building that was once a big warehouse. Some spaces have appropriate ventilation and some do not. How does that affect air quality?
Yeah, it's kind of pretty typical for what we see. Anytime you have a space that's not part of the original ventilation plans, those areas really suffer air quality wise. And so the goal is how do you fix that? And so you can either add ducting and add ventilation into that space, or you bring in a portable unit to create ventilation and air cleaning in that space, or you add a ventilation system that can directly pull air in and out from the outside. But those rooms are going to suffer, and that's what we see when there's additions or when there's a lot of old buildings that were built without the thought of the air quality for the people in the space. a lot of buildings in the Northeast that are older have that problem, government buildings especially. We see that all the time.
Okay, next question. Some older buildings have wall-mounted heaters. These used to get fresh air, but now due to energy conservation needs, the outside air has been closed off. Do such rooms need air purifiers with HEPA filters?
Yeah, that's one solution. I mean, in general, the like the energy crisis of the 70s led to a lot of houses and buildings being built much more energy efficient. And the advantage is it costs less to heat and cool those spaces. But the problem that was created in doing that was ventilation and the mixing of fresh air from the outside and air cleaning were kind of ignored in that process. And so if you have, say, a bunch of chemicals inside or cleaning supplies, there's nowhere for those vapors to go. And so it just kind of is held inside the space. And so the answer is you either need to bring in fresh air from the outside through some sort of ventilation system, or you need to filter it. And a HEPA filter is really good. If it's sized properly for the space, it can do a really nice job with the particles, and the particles including down to virus-sized particles. If you have cleaning supplies like chemicals, gases, things like that, a HEPA filter is not particularly effective for any of that. And the general solution for that is some form of activated carbon or treated carbon, depending upon what the particular gas or chemical is. Those are much more difficult to remove, but there are certain carbons or treated carbons that can really be targeted for, say, formaldehyde or for some other gases or chemicals. And so there's kind of two different sides to it. If the concern is dust and pollen and say bacteria or viruses, then a HEPA filter is the solution. If the concern is off-gassing from copier machines or from chemicals or formaldehyde in furniture, then you're wanting some sort of carbon or treated carbon to effectively absorb those things from the air. Because with a HEPA filter, they're just going to blow right through. They're even smaller than viruses. And quite difficult to remove from an air quality perspective.
Okay, thank you. Next question. If virus-sized particles are 0.01 to 0.02 in size and HEPA is effective at 0.3 microns, how does HEPA effectively work?
Okay, so there's two different principles at play. It's called interception and diffusion. And so for what we call, we'll just say larger size particles, it's more of a mesh or a net that catches things as it passes through. But the way the filters are constructed, as you get to even the smaller size particles, there's a process where it actually, let me back up. Each filter has a certain size that it has a minimum efficiency for. It's called the most penetrating particle size. And so for a lot of filters, it's around, I don't know, 0.04 to 0.1 microns, somewhere in there. That's like the weakest point. And then as you go smaller than that, the efficiency actually increases. And it's because of, and it increases as you go larger than that. And it's really due to, I guess it's physics principles of interception and diffusion. There's two different principles at play. And so, but it's the weakest point is kind of the limit of the filter. And so when you get a true HEPA filter, it could still be 99.5% at 0.04 microns. And then as you go smaller, it would increase the efficiency. I don't know if that really answered it gets kind of beyond technical. to go after that. But what I would say is 0.3 microns is the size that's keyed on. And that's because from some decades ago, that was what was thought to be the most penetrating particle size. And then after that essential standard was set, it was discovered that no, that's not really the right number. It's actually smaller than that. And so the European standard has adopted to measure that and report that differently, but the US standard has not. And we've kind of hung on to this older, older kind of what, I don't know if it's like the metric system versus what we use or what, but it's like we haven't fully adopted with the times in terms of the filter efficiency for the, you know, for the weakest point.
Okay, well, thank you. And I'm sure if the gentleman who asked the question has more, more detail, he'll reach out to you.
Yeah, that might be easier to address outside.
Okay. Next question is, what is the lifespan of a HEPA filter, and how often do they need to be changed?
So it depends on the environment. Generally, it's 6 to 12 months. It can be 12 months unless it's like a kind of a dusty environment. But if it's quite a dusty, dirty environment, it may be closer to 6 months. It really depends, really in the environment that you're in. Like we've had, I'm just kind of thinking about this more on the consumer side. We've had some customers that are like, your filter is not lasting very long, and then they have a lot of pets and it's just totally clogged and filled up. And then, you know, in other environments that don't have so much in the air or getting sucked into the machine, they can last 12, 15 months. And so it's kind of a function of really how clean the space is.
All right, thank you. Next question. Would you recommend using water activity under certain circumstances instead of humidity?
You said water activity?
Yeah, using water activity under certain circumstances instead of humidity.
I'm not quite sure I understand the question. I'm not sure how to answer that.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll get a clarification, or I'll give you the information, the contact information for the gentleman who asked the question, so we can follow up with it.
Okay. Yep.
I think you've answered this one. Is how often should a HEPA filter be checked for replacement?
How often should it be checked? So most machines have a filter replacement light or indicator that basically says, hey, it's time to check the filter. And usually that could be around 6 months or so. Just because the light goes off doesn't mean you have to replace the filter, but again, it's a function of the environment. But the way most HEPA air purifiers work, it's clock based or it's time based, and so it's it runs so many hours, and then the light's going to come on, and it's like, hey, you need to check the filter to make sure everything's good. Some cases it's a matter of if there's a pre-filter or a mesh filter, just vacuuming that, and then it's good for another 4 to 6 months. It really depends on the environment. There's other ones you can just let it run for a year and then just pull it out and replace it, and really minimize any kind of maintenance. For the most part, because they have self-contained motors and fans, they're able to really run for a long time before it becomes a problem. So you could theoretically go a year before checking and replacing it, but it's not a bad idea to check some after 6 months just to make sure they're not really accumulating a lot of dust.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Are spent filters considered hazardous material?
Are spent filters, or used filters?
Used filters, yes.
Well, it's kind of interesting because we're in the process of coming up with a recycling program for our filters and to ensure that they're disposed of properly. And it's, when you have a true HEPA filter, you often have a plastic frame, and that's not easily just, you can't really recycle that. But they're generally okay to put in the trash because they largely just contain dust. It's kind of like a vacuum cleaner bag. But I don't know, just kind of where we're going as an organization, I'm kind of more interested in kind of doing the right thing and kind of recycling these for customers. So that's kind of what we're working on, how to support that right now. But in general, there's, if you have a filter, it's really no different than a furnace filter in your house. It collects dust, and you can toss it in the trash, and that's generally not an issue. It's not, there's no, usually the problem is more on like the machine. Like if it has motors and other things, that's not necessarily always something you could throw in the trash. Those need to be sometimes disposed of differently, but the filters are not really in that class of products.
Okay, thank you. Does the room size, is it only the room size that matters, or does the amount of people in that room play into how big or small a unit is needed?
Yeah, the room size definitely matters. That's like the most important thing. The number of people in the space, generally the issue with that is historically it's just been carbon dioxide that builds up, and assuming you've got the 3 air changes per hour, which is typical in HVAC system, then that's usually not a problem. If it's a COVID situation, I guess that's a bit of a different thing. But the standard is 5 air changes per hour. That'll reduce 80%, and so I think the room size is definitely the most important variable in that. But I would say if it's packed with people, that kind of that's not really part of the calculation, but just logically it seems like you would want more airflow and more more airflow for that space. So that would be a stronger air cleaner or a second air cleaner.
Okay. All right, we have time for a couple more questions here. Next question is, it's a follow-up. Water activity is used to measure the amount of moisture on a surface. In a room, the humidity could be, for example, 40%, but on the surface, it could be 98%.
Actually, I don't know how to answer that one.
Okay.
I'm just thinking of like the humidity and moisture is really the issue. Is it's a mold concern. I'm not really sure in a normal like room environment. I guess if there's standing water, that would be.
The next part of the question does say with mold growing.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously it's like source control. It's like get rid of the water that's standing, or fix the leak, or fix the, I mean, that's, and then that's kind of the main strategy. If you have like an air cleaner trying to address a mold situation, you're trying to play catch up and you're not really solving the source of the problem. And so really to get that under control, it's the source is the if at all possible, that's really what needs to be addressed before you would invest in an air cleaner. UV, it can be a solution to, if there is standing water and there's no way to get rid of standing water, that's probably a better solution to prevent anything from growing. The problem with UV is you just have to be careful. Like it's like looking at the sun. You're not supposed to look at the sun, and it can cause skin burns. And so if there's a safe way to have UV, and typically they're like in enclosed systems, so you don't get in contact with the UV. But that's really probably the next best way to really to prevent mold growth. The other thing you could do is dehumidification, to really try and lower the humidity level in the space, to maybe help with the surface. It's kind of hard to really answer it without knowing all of the details. But with dehumidifiers, like you wouldn't want the humidity to go, say, below 30%, because then you create other problems when it becomes too dry. And so, but there are a couple different ways to approach that, and I kind of would be happy to kind of talk about it outside with some more specifics.
Okay, we have time for one more question, and that is, does vacuuming the HEPA filter damage it?
Typically what happens is there's a pre-filter which sits in front of the HEPA filter. That's generally what gets vacuumed, just to remove the large dust particles. If the large dust particles get in the HEPA filter, it tends to clog it up pretty quickly, and that really reduces the life of the filter. In general, handling the filter or touching it, it depends on what type of media it is. If it's a fiberglass media, touching it and handling it probably would do some damage to the material. If it's more of a polypropylene, plastic, polyester material, which most filters are now, those can be handled and vacuumed really without creating damage to the filter. But for the most part, if an air purifier has a pre-filter in front of the HEPA filter, that's really where the focus of the vacuuming would probably take place. But you could vacuum the HEPA filter also if it's not a fiberglass type material.
Okay. Well, we have a couple more questions, but they're better answered one-on-one, and Peter will get back to you with answers to your questions. So as we go to close, Peter, thank you so much for this very informative webinar today. And to our attendees, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to be with us today. So until next time, be safe, stay healthy, and have a great rest of your week. Bye-bye now.